The Battle of Trench, also known as the Battle of Khandaq or the Battle of the Confederates, was a pivotal moment in the early history of Islam. This battle took place in the year 627 CE, which corresponds to the 5th year of the Hijri calendar. It was a major defensive battle fought by the Muslims of Medina against a large Confederate army of Arab and Jewish tribes led by the Quraysh of Mecca. The Meccans, led by Abu Sufyan, were determined to destroy the nascent Muslim community once and for all. They had gathered a massive army, numbering around 10,000 men, which was the largest force ever seen in Arabia at that time. In comparison, the Muslim army in Medina numbered only about 3,000 men. The odds were overwhelmingly against the Muslims, and the survival of their community hung in the balance. Faced with this existential threat, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gathered his companions to discuss a strategy. The traditional Arab way of fighting was to meet the enemy in an open field, a battle of direct confrontation. However, given the disparity in numbers, such a strategy would have been suicidal for the Muslims. It was during this council of war that a companion named Salman al-Farsi, or Salman the Persian, came forward with a brilliant and unconventional idea. Salman was from Persia, a land with a long history of sophisticated military engineering and siege warfare, something the Arabs were not familiar with. He suggested that instead of fighting in the open, the Muslims should dig a large trench around the exposed northern perimeter of Medina. The other sides of Medina were naturally protected by volcanic rocks, mountains, and dense palm groves, making them difficult for a large army to penetrate. The northern side was the only vulnerable approach. The Prophet Muhammad immediately recognized the wisdom in this plan and approved it. The idea of digging a trench for defense was completely new to the Arabs, and it caught the enemy completely by surprise. The Muslims began the monumental task of digging the trench immediately. It was a massive undertaking. The Prophet himself participated in the digging, working alongside his companions, carrying soil and breaking rocks. This act of leadership greatly boosted the morale of the Muslims. They worked day and night in hunger and cold to complete the trench before the enemy arrived. The trench was designed to be wide enough to prevent enemy cavalry from jumping over it and deep enough to make it difficult for infantry to cross. The project was a testament to the unity, discipline, and perseverance of the early Muslim community. They were all united in their purpose, working together for their collective survival. During the digging, there were reports of small miracles, like a small amount of food feeding a large number of people, which further strengthened their faith and resolve. As the Muslims were busy digging the trench, the Confederate army, led by Abu Sufyan, was marching towards Medina. They were confident of a quick and decisive victory. When they finally arrived at the outskirts of Medina, they were completely shocked and bewildered by what they saw. Instead of an army ready to fight in the open, they were confronted by a massive, impassable ditch. They had never encountered such a tactic before. The trench effectively neutralized their greatest advantage, which was their superior cavalry. The Meccan horsemen, renowned for their skill, could do nothing but ride up and down the length of the trench, shouting insults and challenges, but unable to cross. The Confederate army was forced to lay siege to Medina, something they were ill prepared for. They set up their camps and began a long and frustrating standoff. While the trench was proving to be an effective physical barrier, another grave danger was brewing from within. Abu Sufyan, a cunning strategist, realized that a direct assault was futile. He decided to use diplomacy and deceit to undermine the Muslims from the inside. He sent a man named Huyay ibn Akhtab, the chief of the exiled Jewish tribe of Banu Nadir, to persuade the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza to break their treaty with the Muslims. The Banu Qurayza resided in a fortified area in the southeastern part of Medina and had a long-standing pact of mutual defense with the Prophet Muhammad. If they were to switch sides, they could attack the Muslims from the rear, which would be disastrous. Initially, the leader of Banu Qurayza, Ka'b ibn Asad, refused to break the treaty, remembering the Prophet's faithfulness. However, Huyay was persistent and eventually managed to convince him by promising victory and painting a grim picture of the Muslims' fate. The news of Banu Qurayza's treachery spread fear and panic among the Muslims. The situation became extremely critical. The Muslims were now caught between a massive army at their front and a potential enemy at their back. The Quran describes this moment as a time when the eyes grew wild and the hearts reached the throats. Some of the hypocrites and those with weak faith began to lose hope. They started making excuses to leave the front lines, claiming that their homes were unprotected and they needed to go back to Medina to protect their families. They tried to sow doubt and discord, saying that the promises of God and His messenger were nothing but delusion. This was a severe test of faith for the Muslim community. The Prophet Muhammad, however, remained steadfast and kept the morale of the true believers high. He sent a few companions to verify the news about Banu Qurayza. When they confirmed the betrayal, the Prophet handled the situation with great wisdom, keeping the news contained to prevent widespread panic and demoralization among the ranks. Despite the effectiveness of the trench, the siege was long and arduous. It lasted for nearly a month, and the Muslims faced extreme hardship, including hunger, cold, and constant fear. The Confederates made several attempts to cross the trench at narrow points. A few of their most famous warriors, including the legendary Amr ibn Abd Wood, managed to find a narrow section and jump across with a small group of horsemen. They challenged the Muslims to single combat. Amr was a fearsome warrior, and no one dared to face him until Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet, stepped forward. After a fierce duel, Ali managed to defeat and kill Amr, which was a huge blow to the morale of the Confederates and a major boost for the Muslims. Other warriors who crossed were also driven back or killed, and the Confederates failed to establish a foothold on the Muslim side of the trench. The siege dragged on, and the Confederate army began to face its own problems. They were not prepared for a long siege. Their supplies of food and water were running low, and their animals were dying. The weather also turned against them. A fierce cold wind began to blow, tearing down their tents, extinguishing their fires, and filling their eyes with sand and dust. Dissension and mistrust also started to grow within the ranks of the Confederate army. A man named Nuaym ibn Masud, who was from the Ghatafan tribe, allied with the Quraysh, secretly came to the Prophet and accepted Islam. He then, with the Prophet's permission, cleverly went back and forth between the Quraysh, the Ghatafan, and the Banu Qurayza, spreading misinformation and sowing discord among them. He made each party distrustful of the others, completely shattering their alliance. The combination of the failed assaults, the harsh weather, the dwindling supplies, and the internal discord was too much for the Confederate army to bear. Their morale completely collapsed. Abu Sufyan, realizing that their campaign had failed, gave the order to retreat. Under the cover of the stormy night. The great Confederate army, which had come with such confidence to destroy Islam, packed up and departed in disarray. By the morning, the battlefield was empty. The Muslims had won a decisive victory without fighting a major pitched battle. The Battle of the Trench was a turning point. It demonstrated the strategic genius of the Prophet Muhammad and the unwavering faith and resilience of the Muslim community. It completely broke the military power of the Quraysh and their allies, shifting the balance of power in Arabia permanently in favor of the Muslims. The failure of the siege proved to the surrounding tribes that the Muslim community in Medina was a force to be reckoned with, one that could not be easily destroyed. It paved the way for the eventual peaceful conquest of Mecca a few years later. The battle is a powerful lesson in strategy, faith, perseverance, and the importance of unity in the face of overwhelming odds. It shows how, with divine help and clever planning, a smaller, determined group can overcome a much larger and more powerful enemy.